Hello everyone and welcome to SplitSecond. My name is Cicada and I'll be taking you through today's match. In celebration of hitting 6,000 subscribers, we are having two giveaways. The first to our patrons who have been there supporting us this whole time, and the second to our subscribers. Look for the end of the video for more on these giveaways. This week we're bringing you something different from our normal EDH games. The mentor Kirby from the Commander Tavern was nice enough to invite us to an 8-player Commander Cube afternoon session. It features Kirby himself, Mons from cEDH TV and his friend Pontus, Alex and Martin from Affinity for Commander, and Bal, Luis, and myself from SplitSecond. It was stupid fun, and this is the second game featuring the decks we built. If you want to know more about this cube, we have left a link to Kirby's explanation on the description below. Be mindful that this cube has uncards, theros hero cards, banned EDH beauties, and conspiracies in it, so this will get a bit bananas. This week we are joined by Martin from Affinity for Commander and Pontus, who you can sometimes catch on cEDH TV. Luis is playing with Yarok after trying to draft Richard Garfield PhD, featuring fast mana and heavy value. Pontus is piloting Kenrith, one of the strongest standalone commanders in Magic. Martin is playing a top-end centric Riku of 2 reflections, and Bal with a classic Tymna and Tana combination focused on good stuff. Bal won the role and will be starting. He has a Forest and Wooded Bastion for lands, plus Elvish Mystic and Coalition Relic to really just ramp and be able to build his board. Besides these, Necrologia is pretty good for card draw while acting as a mini Necroponents. Cauldron Dance can give him really good value, and Conclave Tribunal is good interaction that he can abuse with Tana's Saprolings. Luis himself kept Thriving Isle as his only land, although he does have the Broken Gleemox, which is just insane. Erayo is a very strong stacks piece if he manages to flip it. The rest of Luis's hand is really heavy on CMC, making this a very risky keep. Conjured Currency can make the table really unstable. In Garruk's Wake is a one-sided Wrath, Muyan Ling draws cards, and Acidic Slime is interaction that gets extra good with Yarok. Pontus was forced to mulligan down to 6. He kept 3 lands, Mountain, Meandering River, and Esper Panorama. Sunseed Nurturer is his earliest play and ramps him up. Auros can become really annoying for other players to deal with as it clears the board. And Rise to Glory is pretty decent reanimation. Pontus sent Progenitus to the bottom of his library. Finally, Martin also had to mulligan down to 6. Although his hand is fairly okay, albeit lacking in red mana. Everflowing Chalice ramps him up, while Yazova lets him disrupt other boards and play at politics. Edric can further enhance this political aspect of Martin's hand. Shaman of the Great Hunt is an engine of its own right. Time to see how this match unfolds. Before starting the game, we had to set hero cards. Bal has the Philosopher and Martin has the Explorer. Bal starts us off with a Forest and an Elvish Mystic. Luis follows it up with a Thriving Isle naming Black. Pontus goes for a similar route with Meandering River. Because of his hero card, Martin is able to play a Rejuvenating Springs and a Forest followed by an Everflowing Chalice for 1. Forced starting, but pretty ahead now. Bal plays a Wooded Bastion and casts Coalition Relic, keeping up with Martin's ramp and then some. Luis plays a Gleemox, aka Bex Mox in the cube, probably in the game as well, and then asks if no one else is in the mood to cast spells before he goes ahead and casts Erayo. Luis then passes, clearly lamenting his mulligan decisions. Pontus plays a Mountain and a Talisman of Curiosity, which is a nice bump in his speed. Martin plays Temple of Misery, scrying 1. Then he plays an island thanks to the Explorer and casts Yazova Dragonclaw. He moves to end step and Bal puts a counter on Coalition Relic. Bal removes the counter from Coalition Relic and then casts Tymna. He sends Elvish Mystic at Pontus since he can't block, drawing a card. He plays Orge of Basilica, which bounces Wooded Bastion to his hand. Like Adele would say, let the land fall. Luis shocks himself for a Watery Grave and attacks Bal with Erayo, since she will never be used to block. He then passes holding 3 mana and trying his best to intimidate the ramped up players. Pontus plays Esper Panorama and tries his best at seduction as he casts Attempt with Discovery. Martin, being the most responsible player, resists the temptation. Bal and Luis, however, fail to resist, the latter quite reluctantly after accepting he needs the land to fix his previous bad mulligan decisions. Pontus gets Clifftop Retreat. Bal gives the table a gleeful grin as he gets Caracas, being met with groans from pretty much everyone else. And Luis gets a Golgari Rot Farm. Because two people were tempted, Pontus gets an additional Sulphurous Springs and a Spire Garden. Luis has a trigger to return a land to his hand. He floats blue from Watery Grave and returns it since why else would he have shocked himself last turn? Not yet done amassing mana, Pontus pays 3 for a Sunseed Nurturer before passing. Martin plays Frontier Bivouac. He tries to go to combat, but Bal uses Caracas on Yazova to prevent her combat step trigger and stop him from using Tymna to draw cards. Martin replays Yazova on his main phase, but lacks the mana to pay for the trigger, moving to his end step. Bal adds a counter to Coalition Relic. Bal adds white from his relic trigger, plays Woodland Cemetery, followed by a good old Ajani Goldmane. The scales are tipping in his favor. He minuses him, putting a +1/+1 counter on his creatures and giving them vigilance. He goes to combat, swinging Tymna at Luis and the elf at Pontus. Pontus blocks with his white dork, so Bal only gets to draw 1 card. He then Oblivion Rings the poor, harmless Yazova and passes. Luis shocks himself with Watery Grave for the second time. He thinks for a bit and then passes, possibly holding some tricks up his sleeve. Pontus plays an island and reluctantly casts Kenrith because of Caracas. Martin plays a Mox Ruby into a Shaman of the Great Hunt, intent on increasing his presence. He sends it at Luis, which nets the Shaman a +1/+1 counter. On the second main phase, Martin chooses to complicate Bal's Caracas by casting Edric, while commenting it should have been cast before the attack, all the while potentially protecting himself from being focused. On his end step, Luis casts Ultimate Price on Elvish Mystic. This is the 4th spell of the turn, which triggers Erayo. Bal of course responds by bouncing it with Caracas. Due to a critical misreading of the card, Luis thinks he can respond to this ability with another spell, flipping Erayo again. Unfortunately, the Moonfolk only triggers on the 4th spell and not subsequent ones. So Luis lets Caracas resolve and laments having pretty much time-walked himself. Intent on pushing himself fully, Bal plays a Wooded Bastion followed by a Sun Titan. Luis, however, has Mana Leak at the ready. Bal minuses Ajani again and sends Tymna at Luis, actually adding up some commander damage there. He gets to draw 1 from Edric and then pays 1 life to draw another one from Tymna. Luis has a way to deal with Caracas, but he's afraid to not be able to deal with Kenrith. So he just plays Yarok as an attempt at defending himself, passing. Pontus sends Kenrith at Bal, who is clearly ahead. Caracas does its thing, and so he replays his commander before passing. Bal is really making an effort to show us why Caracas is super banned. Martin activates Shaman of the Great Hunt, drawing a card. He then plays a Jace Cunning Castaway. He activates his minus ability, making an illusion. He plays Sulphur Falls and moves to combat, swinging Shaman at Pontus, mostly because Bal is outracing Martin's non-commander damage with life gain. Pontus takes the damage, the Shaman gets a counter, and Martin draws a card from Edric. Solid turn. Bal plays a Saskia, naming Martin because he's the one he doesn't want to attack, so that he gets to draw from his Edric. He bounces Kenrith with Caracas and activates Ajani to put a counter on Tymna and Saskia. He also uses the Philosopher to tap Yarok to make the most out of Tymna. He goes to combat, swinging Tymna at Luis and Saskia at Pontus. The damage passes fully, making it so that Bal damages all of his opponents. He draws 2 from Edric and 2 from Tymna. His lead is getting really oppressive. On his second main phase, Bal plays the Plains and casts Riz the Redeemed. He discards 2 cards on his cleanup. It is clear to everyone that thanks to the combination of Tymna and Edric, Bal is going to keep putting a lot of pressure on the board, and Caracas can keep everyone in check. Something must be done. Luis taps out for an Acidic Slime. It enters the battlefield, triggering Yarok. He targets the Caracas and Coalition Relic, and all effects resolve. The playing field is more even now, and he also got a reliable blocker. He swings Yarok at Pontus, gaining 3 precious life and drawing a card from Edric. He plays a forest and passes the turn. Pontus cracks his Panorama, getting a swamp for his troubles. Pontus plays a Sol Ring into a Razaketh's Right, finding a card and passing with 4 mana open. Not ominous at all. Martin pluses Jace and goes to combat, attacking Luis with an Illusion and Shaman at Pontus. There are no blocks, so he draws 2 from Edric and 1 from Jace, discarding a Rofellas. Both Shaman and the Illusion get a +1/+1 counter, growing ever larger. He plays an island and casts a tiny Intet the Dreamer to further push his value engines. Martin tops that off with a Simic Growth Chamber, returning a basic island to his hand and passing the turn. BaB removes the last loyalty counter from his kitty, a Johnny, making his board bigger. He moves to combat and taps Acidic Slime in the beginning of combat with his hero card. He swings Tymna at Luigi since she is quite ready to kill a player with commander damage, and Saskia and Riz at Pontus. Martin loses 13 from Saskia. He then draws 3 from Edric and pays 2 for another 2 from Tymna. BaB plays a luxury suite and passes, discarding to clean up. Luigi goes to combat and swings Yarok at Pontus once again, drawing 1 from Edric. He then recasts Serayo and moves to clean up himself, hoping he can protect himself from that chunky Tymna. Pontus plays a tapped Spire Bluff Canal and casts Kenrith, which he now realistically expects to stay on the board. He passes. Martin plays an island. He pluses Chase and goes to combat. After some consideration, he sends only Intet at BaB, which gets bigger because of the Shaman. Martin does pay for the Intet trigger while also drawing from Edric and looting from Jace. Martin plays the Intet Exiled card, a training center, and then pays 4 to activate Shaman, drawing 2 cards. While editing, we noticed that this was actually his 3rd land for turn, as Intet's ability allowed him to play Training Center. These mistakes occurred mostly because the turns were really long, and so we forgot about the land drops. He then taps out for a Flame Blast Dragon. On Martin's end step, BaB casts Terminate, targeting Acidic Slime, in order to try and get that free attack on Luigi. Luigi has Unwind though, untapping 3 lands. BaB then activates Riz for a 1/1 Elf Warrior. Still during Martin's end step though, Brundown casts a Pongify, targeting Tymna. This finally triggers and flips Serayo, making things harder on everyone else, all the while protecting Luigi from the Tymna Voltron plan. BaB plays Cave of Koilos and casts Lidari Druid, which gets countered by Erayo. Probably for the best, considering how long it would take to resolve the trigger. He then plays a Pitiless Plunderer and goes to attack, sending everything but Saskia at Luigi. Luigi trades a Simic Slime for Riz. BaB makes a treasure from Plunderer and draws 2 from Edric. Saskia deals 4 damage to Martin. We had a little Mitra moment here from Luigi as well, as he forgot to take note of BaB's damage. 5 hours of magic will do that. As such, we are not taking his life change in post-production, to represent in-game values and better frame the player's choices. He then convokes a Conclave Tribunal targeting Flame Blast Dragon, just in case. Luigi plays a Dismal Backwater, gaining 2 because of Yarok. He goes to combat and swings his commander at BaB, drawing a card from Edric. On his second main, he plays Mu Yanling and uses her to draw 2 more cards. On Luigi's end step, Pontus activates Kenrith to gain 5 life and to put a counter on his commander. Let the Kenrith thing begin. Pontus plays an island and casts Etali, which gets countered by Erayo. This is a non-issue though, for he immediately reanimates it with Kenrith and gives it Trample and Haste while he's at it. Etali is sent at BaB, triggering. Pontus hits the jackpot of misfortune as 3 lands get exiled from it, and only the Gruul Signet can be cast from Martin's side. Pontus does just that before passing. Martin plays a mountain and casts Melek, which gets countered, only to follow it up with a Molten Primordial just for kicks. It enters the battlefield and gains control of Yarok, an Ape, and Etali. He gets to attack, sending Intet, Shaman, Primordial, and Etali at BaB. Yarok goes for Pontus and the Ape for Luigi. Etali triggers, this time doing a much better job. It reveals Kismet from BaB, Villis from Luigi, Buried Alive from Pontus, and a mountain from himself. While we were speaking and trying to maintain all the triggers and interactions correctly, Martin mistakenly plays his mountain, although Etali only allows you to cast non-land cards exiled this way. This allowed him to play an extra spell later in this turn, but we only noticed this while editing, and as you will see it won't affect much of the outcome of the game. Martin casts all but Buried Alive, draws 6 from Edric, gets +1/+1 counters on the creatures that hit players, and gains life from Yarok. But Martin is not done. He plays his second land for turn, the mountain, and casts Inzerva, Master of Insights, which he uses to Fate Seal 2 everyone else, getting rid of an incoming Wrath from BaB and Extract from Darkness from Pontus, while he scries 2 for himself. He then makes an illusion with Jace and passes after this modest tiny turn. Everyone gets their stolen creatures back with an extra +1/+1 counter for their trouble. At this point, BaB is considering the odds of drawing the second Wrath from his deck to get out of this mess. He swings everything at Luis. Martin takes 11 from Saskia and draws 11 from Village, but remains tapped out. BaB does find the answer he needed with Edric's draw, so he pitches a Talisman of Progress to Erayo. He follows that with Cryptborn Horror, which enters play with 22 counters. Brandon asks him,
"I'm gonna fling it."
I'm going to fling it, I just drawn fling as well.
BaB then proceeds to mercilessly cast the said fling on it, surprising the table. He aims it at Martin, taking him out of the game before he can become an even more insane menace. 22 damage from fling in a queue. It's not Infinity Elemental, but still did the job. BaB does forget Plunderer's artifact amidst this Rafflecopter, so he plays the mountain and passes. Luis begins by letting Mu Yanling go as he uses her to draw 2. He plays Archaeomancer, bringing back Ultimate Price and Pongify. Yarok is putting the work now for someone that was drafting a Richard Garfield deck. He plays a Jungle Hollow, gaining 2. He discards to end size before Pontus gets to it. On Pontus's upkeep, BaB taps Etali with his hero card. No free value under his watch. Pontus plays Savai Triumph and casts Rise to Glory, which gets countered by Erayo. He then casts yet another Aether Vortex. For the unacquainted, this red enchantment is an uncard that gives every creature haste and makes everyone play with their top card revealed. Non-instant and non-sorcery cards that are on top of libraries are considered to be in play. It resolves and Pontus reveals a Whip of Erebus as his top card. BaB reveals a Jungle Shrine and Luis reveals a Mox Jet. We wonder how we can tap the top card of our library for mana, but the game continues as normally as possible. Pontus goes to combat and he swings Kenrith at BaB, getting life from Whip of Erebus. BaL, our resident L1 judge, ruled that since Jungle Shrine never actually entered play, it should count as untapped. We agree it makes sense and proceed to play this way. It's an uncard anyway. While editing, however, he found out that he joined the Mitro Club again as he thought he could tap it in the draw step before actually drawing it in order to get the most out of the Vortex. This is not possible though, as drawing the top card is a turn-based action and happens before anyone has priority, so in this scenario he ends up having one more mana than he should. However, it doesn't affect the outcome of the game, as you'll see later. After drawing it, he reveals a forest on top of his deck. He taps that forest to cast a generous gift targeting Archaeomancer, which gets countered by the ever-present Erayo. BaL proceeds to the beginning of his combat step and casts a Cauldron Dance, targeting Sun Titan and Tajik. Fortunately for his own safety, Luis has Deprive, returning Jungle Hollow to his hand and countering the Cauldron Dance. BaL decides to simply swing his chunky Saskia at Pontus before playing Jungle Shrine and passing. Luis reveals a Mazemind Tome on the top of his library. He plays Mox Jet and a Swamp. He then plays In Garruk's Wake, surprised he lasted long enough to go for it. BaL responds by tapping Yarok and the rest resolves. While editing, BaL caught himself again entering the Mitra pages. This time around, he noticed he had misread Pitiless Plunderer and that it only creates treasures for other creatures dying, not from himself. So he should have only created 3 treasures instead of 4. This however won't change the outcome of the game, as you'll be able to see. Luis passes. Pontus reveals an Indartha Triumph on top of his library. He taps it to cast Whip of Erebos, which gets countered by Erayo. He follows that up with Kenrith. He can now kill BaL if he wants, but he ponders for a bit and decides to attack Luis, not at all confident he can win the game with BaL gone. Before blockers, Luis activates Mazemind Tome, scrying 1 and putting the tome itself on the bottom of the library, which is actually pretty cool as a play. He hopes to find a big boy to block with. Instead, he reveals the chunky coveted jewel. He taps it for 3 mana to cast Ultimate Price on Kenrith. Pontus responds and gains 5 life with his commander. BaL draws the forest and reveals a World Fire from the top. He sacrifices Chromatic Lantern to the goddess of permission, Erayo, and then the players realize that BaL is 3 points of commander damage short of killing Luigi with Tymna. And so, BaL casts Tymna and Tana. They both have haste thanks to the Vortex. BaL plays the forest and taps Archaeomancer with his hero card, and swings both creatures at Luigi, gaining control of Coveted Jewel and drawing 3 in the process. Luigi reveals a forest from the top. We have a discussion on whether gaining control of a card on top of someone's library makes it go to your battlefield or library. We decide it's getting way too late in the evening, so we just agree it probably goes to the battlefield. The Jewel untaps and draws Baal the Worldfire, Sabotavok, and Golgari Guildgate, leaving Core Haven on the top of his library. He gains 2 life and makes 2 tokens from Tana. Luis draws and reveals an Arcane Signet on the top of his library. He plays a forest and casts Memnarch, entering full survival mode. Pontus draws and reveals yet another forest on top of his library. He taps the forest and cycles a Triumph, revealing another land on top. So unlucky. He plays the Drawn Forest, but he can't play a spell for Erayo, so he is forced to pass. Still on his end step, Baal cycles Decree of Justice to make 2 soldier tokens. He draws the Core Haven he had on top and reveals the Shadowgang Brothers from the top of his deck. This is actually the perfect answer for Luis's board. Oh boy. Baal untaps and activates Shadowgang, sacrificing a soldier to make Luis sack a creature. Luis sacks Archaeomancer. He repeats this and Luis sacks Yarok. One more time and Luis sacks Memnarch. Finally, Baal sacrifices Oblivion Ring to force everyone to sacrifice an enchantment. Luis sacrifices Erayo and Pontus sacrifices the Vortex. Better yet, the card exiled from the ring is from Martin, so it leaving the battlefield doesn't affect anything. Baal plays the Core Haven. He goes to attack and swings everything at Luis. Luis pongifies Tymna just so that it doesn't die. Baal makes 2 saplings from Tana and then passes, getting back to being the main manas on the board. Luis replays Yarok, plays Jungle Hollow to gain 2 life, followed by Arcane Signet. He passes. Pontus plays a mountain and replays Kenrith, immediately activating his ability to reanimate Etali. He then gives his creatures trample and haste with Kenrith and goes to combat. Baal taps Etali with the Philosopher before attackers are declared, keeping himself safe. Pontus sends Kenrith at Baal, and Baal trades with his ape and 2 saplings, avoiding lethal. Baal sends Tana at Pontus, making 2 saplings, and then casts Shadowgang Brothers. He plays a Thriving Bluff, naming Black. He casts Moldervine Reclamation and activates Shadowgang, sacrificing a creature and making everyone else sacrifice a creature, while also drawing a card from Moldervine Reclamation. Luis sacrifices Yarok and Pontus loses Etali. He passes. Luis casts Animate Dead, targeting Memnarch. He activates Memnarch to make Shadowgang Brothers into an artifact. He then attempts to steal it with Memnarch. Unfortunately, Luis missed that Shadowgang also has the ability to sacrifice itself. We've all been playing the queue for over 6 hours now. So Baal responds to the ability by sacrificing Shadowgang, making Luis lose Memnarch in the process while also drawing a card from Moldervine Reclamation. Luis passes, not too excited about his odds. Pontus simply plays the plains and casts Kenrith and also just passes. On Baal's turn, Pontus proposes to give Tymna haste if Baal kills Banandang and doesn't become too scary, so Baal does just that. He casts Tymna and Pontus activates Kenrith to give all creatures haste and trample. Baal goes to attacks and sends Tymna and Tana at Luis and a single sapling at Pontus. He takes a second player out as Luis perishes from commander damage. Coveted Jewel is exiled and Baal makes 2 tokens from Tana and draws 2 cards from Tymna. He then plays Banishing Light targeting Kenrith. Pontus responds by activating his commander to draw a card. The returned king is returned to the command zone. Baal plays a Selesnya Sanctuary, returning a plains to his hand. He passes, discarding to hand size. Pontus begins the turn by casting Shifting Doppelganger. He then exiles it to put Oros the Avenger into play. He goes to combat and swings Oros at Baal. Baal has the Core Haven, preventing it from dealing damage. On his end step, Baal taps Doppelganger with the Philosopher. Baal swings with everything at Pontus. He casts Infinity Elemental just to be sure and then passes. Pontus is still trying to find his Emrakul but only gets another mountain for the turn, so he recasts Kenrith for a whopping 13 mana and passes. Baal taps Kenrith on the end step. He then taps the Doppelganger on his turn and goes to combat, swinging for literally infinite damage, which actually does the trick. Thank you for joining us for today's matches, everyone. Kirby's Commander Cube was super fun to play with and, as you can see, leads to a lot of explosiveness. We'd like to start the credits by thanking our current patrons and especially Izanagi, Stefan, TJ Rapp, Mike Purr, Adjimo, Iglegal, Hitachill, Drunken House Cat, and LL Chlorant, our stack riggers. As we've announced at the beginning of this video, we have 2 giveaways running. If you're a patron by the 1st of November, you'll be eligible to win Magic Fest Sol Ring, MechaGodzilla Hangarback Walker, Buy a Box Chord of Calling, and Bring a Friend Edition Reliquary Tower. As for our non-patron subscribers, all you need to do is comment on this or upcoming videos with #giveaway and your favorite moment from any of our videos to be eligible to win Foil Japanese Crystalline Giant, Buy a Box Wrath of God, MechaGodzilla Hangarback Walker, and a Bring a Friend Edition Reliquary Tower. All of these cards were graciously sponsored by our LGS Arena portal, which has been adamant in their support to our channel. If you want to go through other Commander adventures, click one of the videos on the right. If you want to talk with us about our games or other EDH related matters, join us on Discord. Come with us again next week for a new set of Commanders and more decisive plays. See you all then.